He said it himself, days before kickoff. This will be my last World Cup. Cristiano Ronaldo, 41 years old, standing on the edge of the biggest stage in football for what everyone in the stadium knew might be the final time. Across from him, Spain, unbeaten in 34 straight matches, a wall that hadn't conceded a single goal in the entire tournament, round of 16. Dallas, Texas, a packed AT&T stadium under the Texas sun. One team walks away with a shot at the quarterfinals. The other walks away possibly into history's rearview mirror. This is the story of Portugal versus Spain, World Cup 2026, a match that started as a tactical chess game and ended with a gut punch nobody saw coming until the 95th minute. Before we dive into every twist of this round of 16 classic, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're breaking down every major knockout match of this World Cup, minute by minute, decision by decision. Drop a comment right now with your prediction for who lifts the trophy, Spain, Portugal, or someone else entirely, because I want to see it before you know how this one ends. All right, let's get into it. To understand why this match carried so much weight, you have to understand the paths both teams took to get here. Spain, the reigning European champions, arrived at this World Cup as the form team of world football. Luis de la Fuente's side had built a run of 34 consecutive matches without defeat, a streak that had already put them in rare company on the doorstep of a record shared only by legendary managers like Aimé Jacquet and Louis van Gaal for unbeaten starts across major international tournaments. That is not hyperbole. That is the actual context Spain brought into this stadium. Their group stage, though, wasn't the coronation some expected. Spain topped Group H, but not without a stumble, a shockingly goalless draw against a gritty Cape Verde side in their opening match. It was the kind of result that makes pundits pause and ask whether the wheels might finally be coming off a golden generation. Spain answered those questions emphatically, grinding out a win over Saudi Arabia and then putting Uruguay away to close the group on their terms. Confidence restored, they walked into the round of 32 against Austria and put on an exhibition, winning 3-0 to punch their ticket into the knockout rounds, looking sharp, ruthless, and most importantly, untouched at the back. Not one goal conceded, not one moment where the Spanish defense truly looked rattled. Up top, the story was Mikel Oyarzabal. The Real Sociedad forward had been Spain's chief goal scorer through the group and into the knockouts, netting either side of a milestone moment for Pedro Porro, who scored his first ever international goal in that win over Austria. Every Portuguese defender watching the tape ahead of this match knew exactly who they needed to shut down, spot the runs, track the movement. Do not give Oyarzabal a sniff. Portugal's route to Dallas was messier, more human, more dramatic, and honestly, more Portugal. Drawn into Group K, Roberto Martinez's men were held to frustrating draws by both DR Congo and Colombia, results that had alarm bells ringing back home. Sandwiched between those two stalemates was the one moment of group stage certainty, a 5-0 demolition of Uzbekistan that reminded everyone exactly what this Portuguese squad is capable of when the pieces click. Still, finishing second in the group meant a tougher draw awaited, and it arrived immediately in the round of 32 against Croatia. That Croatia match will go down as one of the most dramatic of the tournament's opening knockout round. Portugal found themselves behind when Ivan Perisic, still causing problems for defenses at this level, opened the scoring. Cristiano Ronaldo, on as ever the focal point of everything Portugal do going forward, drew his side level from the penalty spot, refusing to let his final World Cup end in the round of 32. But it wasn't Ronaldo who delivered the decisive blow. It was substitute Gonçalo Ramos, introduced from the bench, who popped up in the 94th minute to complete the turnaround and send Portugal through on the most dramatic terms possible. If you want foreshadowing for what was about to happen against Spain. Remember that scoreline, a match settled in stoppage time by a substitute on the finest of margins. And then there's the history between these two nations, which added an entire extra layer of tension to this fixture before a ball was even kicked. The last time Portugal and Spain met competitively was the 2025 Nations League final, a match that had everything, including a Ronaldo equalizer that forced extra time before Portugal eventually prevailed on penalties. Spain came into this World Cup round of 16 clash with that defeat still sitting somewhere in the back of their minds. This wasn't just a knockout match, this was a rematch. This was Spain looking for revenge and Portugal looking to prove the Nations League triumph wasn't a fluke. The build-up and the narrative everyone was talking about. In the days leading into this game, one storyline dominated every preview, every broadcast, every headline. Would this be the last time we ever see Cristiano Ronaldo play a World Cup match? Ronaldo had already confirmed as much publicly, closing the door himself on any speculation about 2030. At 41, playing in a fifth different decade of senior international football, the man had nothing left to prove, and yet there he was, still starting, still the reference point around which Portugal's entire attacking structure was built. Every camera in that stadium knew where to point. Every commentator worldwide knew what was potentially at stake, beyond just 3 points and a spot in the quarterfinals. This had the feel of an ending, whichever way it went. On the other side of the pitch, the pressure was just as real, just wearing a different shape. Spain hadn't reached a World Cup quarterfinal since they lifted the entire trophy back in 2010. 16 years of knockout stage frustration at the actual World Cup, even as they piled up European Championship success and built one of the most feared possession-based sides in the modern game, had left an obvious gap on the resume. This Spain squad, this specific golden generation of technicians, wanted to prove they could do it on the World Cup stage, not just in Europe. Beat Portugal, get through the round of 16, and that 16-year wait for a World Cup quarterfinal appearance would finally be over. Predictions in the build-up leaned heavily towards Spain. Their defensive record was immaculate. Their squad depth, their control of matches through midfield, and the sheer weight of that 34-game unbeaten run had bookmakers and analysts alike expecting a routine day at the office for La Roja. But anyone who has watched Portugal in a knockout match involving Ronaldo knows better than to write them off. This is a team that thrives in exactly these circumstances. Written off, doubted, backed into a corner with their captain's legacy on the line. When the teams walked out under the Dallas lights, Roberto Martinez set his men up in a defensively disciplined shape designed to frustrate Spain's rhythm and hit them on the counter through pace and Ronaldo's movement in behind. De La Fuente, true to form, trusted his usual principles, patient build-up, quick combinations in tight spaces, and fullbacks pushing high to overload the width. From the opening whistle, this was every bit the tactical arm wrestle everyone expected. Spain, as they had done all tournament, dominated the ball, stringing together passing sequences that pulled Portugal's defensive block from side to side, testing patience, probing for the smallest crack. Portugal sat compact, disciplined, content to let Spain have the possession stats while keeping their own shape tight enough that clear sight of goal was hard to find. The first real moment of danger arrived through Portugal, not Spain, and it summed up exactly why nobody should have underestimated this side. A driving move down the left found space in behind, and the resulting effort took a wicked deflection before cannoning off the crossbar, the kind of moment that, on another day, with the smallest change of fortune, puts Portugal ahead against the run of possession. It was a warning shot. Spain had the ball, but Portugal had the moments. In a knockout match, moments are often worth more than territory. As the half wore on, chances remained scarce for both sides, a testament to two defenses that had, by this stage of the tournament, built a genuine identity around control and discipline. Spain continued to knock the ball around with their trademark patience, occasionally finding pockets between Portugal's lines. without ever quite manufacturing the clear-cut opportunity their overall control of the game seemed to promise. Portugal, for their part, looked dangerous in transition, quick, direct, willing to throw numbers forward the moment. Possession changed hands but struggled to sustain any real pressure once Spain regrouped defensively. By the halfway point, the underlying numbers told an interesting story that would only become more relevant as the match wore toward its conclusion. Spain's expected goals tally sat well clear of Portugal's, a reflection of their territorial dominance and their ability to work the ball into promising areas. Portugal's number was lower, but their moments that deflected effort off the bar chief among them carried real threat. This was shaping into exactly the kind of attritional, low-event, knockout match that so often turns on a single moment of quality, a single mistake, or a single substitution late in the game. Nobody in that stadium and nobody watching around the world had any idea just how true that would turn out to be. Every knockout match like this one really comes down to a handful of individual duels playing out inside the larger tactical picture, and this one had no shortage of it. On one side of the pitch, Portugal's defensive unit had the unenviable task of shadowing Mikel Oyarzabal, a forward in the form of his life, someone who had already shown throughout the tournament that he doesn't need many sniffs of goal to make one count. Get tight, cut off his space in behind, and force him wide. That was the assignment, and for the majority of the match, Portugal's backline executed it about as well as anyone could ask. On the other side, Spain's defenders knew exactly what kind of night awaited them the moment Ronaldo's runs in behind started stretching their shape. Even at 41, even without the same explosive burst of his 20s, Ronaldo's positioning and finishing instincts remained some of the sharpest in the sport, and Spain's center backs treated every long ball forward like a potential live grenade. It's a testament to both defenses that neither of these individual battles produced a goal across 90-plus minutes, right up until fatigue, fresh legs, and a moment of composure from the bench finally tipped the balance. Midfield was its own quiet battleground too. Spain's control of possession meant their midfield trio dictated where and how the ball moved for long stretches, while Portugal's shape relied on compact banks that funneled Spanish attacks into predictable, defendable areas. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't end-to-end, but it was exactly the kind of low-event, high-stakes chess match that so often defines the business end of a World Cup. We're going to pause the story right here at the midpoint of this incredible contest, because what happens in the second half, the substitutions, the momentum swings, and the stoppage time moment that will define Cristiano Ronaldo's World Cup legacy deserves its own complete telling. Stick with us into part 2, where we break down exactly how Spain finally found their breakthrough, how Portugal's dream ended in the cruelest possible fashion, and what both of these footballing giants do next. Part 2. Stoppage time heartbreak in the aftermath, stoppage time heartbreak in the aftermath. 90 minutes on the clock, still 0-0. Cristiano Ronaldo's final World Cup match ticking into its dying embers, and every single person inside AT&T Stadium, every Portuguese fan clutching their scarf a little tighter, every Spanish supporter chewing their nails to the bone believed this thing was heading somewhere between penalties and heartbreak. Then Luis de la Fuente made a substitution, a quiet one. Nobody in the stands could have predicted what it would trigger in the next 4 minutes. This is where the story turns. If part 1 had you on the edge of your seat, do me a favor before we finish this off, smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, because we've got the full second half breakdown, the reaction, and what comes next for both of these teams. And seriously, comment below, was this Portugal's last real shot with this Ronaldo generation, or do you think they come back stronger? Let's finish the story. If the first half was a tactical standoff, the second half of this round of 16 clash settled into something closer to attrition. Both managers had clearly identified the same truth at the break. This match would not be decided by a flowing, free-flowing spectacle. It would be decided by fine margins, fresh legs, and whichever bench made the sharper call when it mattered most. Spain continued to dictate the tempo, as they had done for the better part of 90 minutes. Their passing network stayed patient, their fullbacks kept pushing width, and their front line kept probing for the gap that had eluded them for so long. But Portugal held compact, resolute, occasionally desperate in their defending, but held. Roberto Martinez's side had built their entire tournament identity on exactly this kind of defensive discipline, and for long stretches of the second half, it looked like it might be enough to drag Spain into extra time. Or even penalties, a scenario Portugal would have gladly accepted given their penalty shootout pedigree against this very opponent just a year earlier in the Nations League final. Chances remained rare. Both sides made their tweaks, Martinez looking to inject fresh legs into an attack that had grown increasingly reliant on moments of individual quality rather than sustained pressure, De La Fuente searching for any final spark that could unlock a defense that had conceded nothing all tournament and clearly had no intention of starting down. The match had the tension of a chess endgame, both sides aware that one mistake, one lapse in concentration could be fatal, and both sides equally aware that time was quickly running out to make something happen through craft alone. This is the part of a World Cup knockout match that separates the great sides from the good ones, not the moments of individual brilliance, but the composure to keep making the right decisions when fatigue sets in and legs get heavy. Spain, for all their attacking talent, had built their reputation this tournament on exactly that kind of composure. And in this moment, with the clock working against them and a place in the quarterfinals slipping away by the minute, that composure would prove decisive. As the match ticked past the 90th minute and deep into stoppage time, De La Fuente turned to his bench one more time. On came midfielder Fernando Torres, no relation to the legendary striker of the same surname, but a player who had impressed in flashes throughout the tournament alongside Mikel Merino, the Arsenal midfielder whose timing, as it turned out, could not have been more perfect. Fresh legs in a match this attritional are worth their weight in gold, and it showed almost immediately. Portugal's back line, exhausted from 90 minutes of relentless defending against wave after wave of Spanish pressure, had precious little left to give against runners who hadn't spent the previous hour and a half chasing shadows. And then it happened. Deep into injury time, with the entire stadium bracing for the referee's whistle and a trip to extra time, Torres found space and slid a pass through to his fellow substitute, Mikel Merino, arriving late into the box, exactly the way great instinctive number 10s and box-crashing midfielders are taught to from childhood, met the ball, took a composed touch, and slotted it calmly past Diogo Costa in the Portugal goal. 1-0, Spain, in the most dramatic circumstances imaginable. The whole stadium seemed to freeze for a half second before erupting pure elation for one set of supporters, pure devastation for the other. The referee, English official Anthony Taylor, blew the whistle for a Spanish corner set-piece routine to restart, and the writing was on the wall. There would be no time for Portugal to mount a response. When the final whistle sounded moments later, Spain had done it. 1-0 winners, through to the World Cup quarterfinals, and Portugal and Cristiano Ronaldo were out. Strip away the emotion for a moment and look at what the underlying data told us about this match, because it's genuinely revealing. Spain finished the contest with an expected goals figure of 1.77, nearly 3 times higher than Portugal's 0.6. In plain terms, that means Spain created and generated the far higher quality and volume of scoring chances across the full 90-plus minutes, even though the scoreline stayed level for almost the entirety of the match. Portugal's radar was built around moments that deflected effort, cannoning off the crossbar in the first half being the clearest example rather than sustained control. This is often how knockout football actually plays out beneath the surface. A team can dominate the underlying numbers for the better part of 2 hours and still find themselves searching for answers deep into stoppage time simply because a compact, well-drilled defense and a bit of good fortune can keep the scoreboard frozen for an agonizingly long time. Spain's task ultimately was to keep creating and trust that quality would eventually tell. It did, just not until almost the final kick of the match. No recap of this match is complete without sitting for a moment with what it meant for Cristiano Ronaldo. Cameras repeatedly found him as the final whistle approached, and then sounded a 41-year-old icon of the game, almost certainly playing in his last ever World Cup appearance. Watching his tournament end, not with a whimper, but with a gut punch delivered in the cruelest possible window of the match. There were no clear-cut chances of note for him or his teammates in that second half, a quieter ending statistically than the drama of the occasion demanded. But that quietness made the final scene almost more poignant. A legendary career at international football's biggest stage, closing not with a moment of individual magic, but with him simply standing on the pitch, taking in what had just happened as Spanish players celebrated a few yards away. Whether this truly is the last time we see Ronaldo at a World Cup remains, technically, an open question until he says so with total finality. But every signal, his own pre-tournament words, his age, the natural arc of a career that has already rewritten record books across 2 decades points toward this being the end of that particular chapter. Whistle, a show of respect and shared heartbreak for a captain who had carried this nation's hopes through 5 World Cups. For Spain, the road continues, and it continues with real stakes attached. Their reward for advancing is a quarterfinal date with the winner of the following night's round of 16, tied between co-hosts United States and Belgium, a matchup that, at time of writing, remained undecided. Whichever side emerges from that contest, Spain will head into the quarterfinal as one of the formed teams left in the entire tournament, still unbeaten, still yet to concede more than a single goal across the whole competition, and now just 2 wins away from ending that 16-year wait to return to a World Cup semi-final. For Portugal, the questions are heavier and far more existential. This golden generation, built so heavily around Ronaldo's presence both on the field and in the dressing room, now faces a genuine crossroads. Roberto Martinez will have real decisions to make about the shape of this squad moving forward, about who steps into the leadership void that Ronaldo's likely international retirement will leave behind, and about how quickly players like Gonzalo Ramos, the hero of the Croatia match just 1 round earlier, can be trusted to carry the attacking weight. This team has leaned on Ronaldo to shoulder for the better part of 2 decades. Luis de la Fuente will walk away from this match with his substitutions vindicated in about the most emphatic way a manager can ask for. Bringing on Torres and Marino in the closing stages was the kind of call that looks obvious in hindsight and courageous in the moment, trusting fresh legs and specific skill sets to break down a tired defense rather than simply hoping his starters could find one more piece of quality on their own. It continues a run of tournament management that has now taken Spain to the brink of major tournament history, chasing that rare unbeaten start shared by only a handful of managers across the game's biggest competitions. Roberto Martinez, on the other hand, will likely reflect on a performance that, in isolation, gave his team every right to believe they belonged on this stage. Holding one of the tournament's most dominant attacking sides to a single goal and only in the final kicks of the match is not a small achievement. But knockout football rarely rewards moral victories, and Martinez knows better than anyone that this result will be remembered for how it ended, not for the 90 minutes of defensive discipline that preceded it. In the end, this match will be remembered less for its overall quality and more for its ending a stoppage time strike from a substitute, a scoreline that undersold the balance of chances, and a legendary career, very possibly reaching its final World Cup whistle in the same instant Spain's own long-awaited return to the last 8 finally arrived. 2 different emotions sharing the exact same moment on the exact same pitch in Dallas. There's also a broader tournament context worth sitting with here. This round of 16 has already produced its fair share of shockwaves, heavyweight names exiting earlier than expected, dramatic stoppage time swings deciding tickets to the quarterfinals, and questions swirling around several of the world's biggest footballing nations about what comes next for their golden generations. Portugal and Ronaldo's exit slots right into that pattern. Another giant of the sport forced to reckon in real time with the idea that even the greatest careers eventually run into a night where the margins simply don't fall their way. That's the full story of Portugal versus Spain at the 2026 World Cup. If you enjoyed this breakdown, Make sure you're subscribed for our coverage of the quarterfinals because with matches like this one, this tournament isn't slowing down anytime soon. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Spain deserve it on the balance of play, or does this Portugal team deserve better than a stoppage time exit? Let us know, hit that notification bell, and we'll see you in the next one.